We're having some beautiful weather here in southern Minnesota. It's 55 degrees out today. It was 60 yesterday. So I'm running around in a short sleeve shirt. Probably wind up catching the COVID or something. I don't know. But I told you at one point I was going to show you how to make that knot on the end of the strap, lifting strap for a Luger holster. So, as much as I kind of dread making one, I have to make. I'm just going to extend the strap on a holster. It broke off, and it probably lost about that knot and about 2 to 3 inches of the strap. So I'm just going to make that much of it. The customer doesn't want to replace the whole strap, and I understand why. It is quite a process to do. That strap, if you look inside of a Luger holster, there's this piece of leather here. That strap tucks under that piece, and it stitches in right here with this belt loop. And it tucks under this piece, so you have to actually split the holster at least down one side to get behind there to do that. And he doesn't want to do that, and I totally understand that. He wants to keep as much of the original holster bits and bobs intact. Totally get it, and I'm okay with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to splice that knot in, and he's fully aware that that's the way it's going to be, and it's not going to look. I can't even fake it when I do a splice like that, so I'm not going to try. I will use some finer thread. It's a black holster. This is not the one. The strap is fine on this one. I will use a finer black thread. It's a black holster, so I will just use a thinner black thread and try to make it as inconspicuous as possible, but you'll know it's been done. We'll just do it as good as we can. So I have a piece of 4 to 5 ounce. It's real important. You need to have tools like this. This is a little thickness gauge. I measured what's left of the strap, and I can show you on this one. Let me put you down on a bench here. Go here and just measure it. This measures in millimeters. It's not an actual leather thickness gauge. And it measures about 2 millimeters. Measures in tenths of a millimeter because I didn't want to get in half of a tenth. So measures in tenths of a millimeter, which is fine. That's all the better I need to get. Tenths of a millimeter are pretty small. So what I needed to do is come up with something fairly close. And when I check this, I'm at 8. Getting the right spot. I'm at 8 there. 8. 8. 9. There I'm at 10. Or at 2 millimeters. Here I'm right at 2 millimeters, and I cut this strap out. I always make 2 when I gotta do this. It's not much material. I've already traced my pattern on here. This one is at 2 millimeters. I'm gonna make the first one out of this piece, but I thought I'd take you along. So there we go. I will use a straight edge and cut that off nice and straight. On my pattern, I've used this so many times, I have some marks for skiving. There's going to be a little groove here. I'm going to skive here, and it's going to get folded in the middle, and it'll get wet. So I'm going to take it and make those marks. It'll be dyed black, but I want to make sure I get my holes punched in it first. So that is my next step. I don't remember what size punch I used. I just got some daubers in too, so I had one of my goodie days. I want to say 3. Yeah, I think it was 3mm. I do this just like I do a lot of my holes when I cut them. Alright, so I'm back. These holes don't have to be absolutely perfect. If I could find somebody that could make me a punch to punch those holes out, I'd be ecstatic. I would give them the measurements and have those give me a die made or a punch made for that. I need to transfer the marks for the fold and the groove. There's a skive mark, which is probably the most important one. And it seems to me, I have to remember, there's a groove that gets cut 30mm down. Skive 30mm down. Groove to 60mm. And what the groove is going to do is it's just going to facilitate us kind of folding that in a little bit. And all I use to do that is a regular stitch groover. And I will put, basically I want to go 1/3 of the distance. So I'm not cutting a super deep groove. I just want to help it to fold a little so it fits through those holes. So, not super deep, just there. And when I skive, I want to go to about half the thickness, and you'll understand why when we start manipulating this. Probably should have skived before I put the holes in there, huh? Sometimes I get ahead of myself. Alright, got that. Grab the Odin number 3 edger, and I'm just gonna So there I go. Get my skive. Get my notch. Or my groove, I should say. My bevel. Not much more I can do right there. I am gonna knock the corner, just a little bit of the corner off here. And that's just because otherwise the corners will deform a little bit as we're doing this, and they kind of wind up sticking out of the knot. The rest, I'm going to bevel this, or kind of bring it down to somewhat of a point. Not necessarily a point, but just don't want it flat. It's got to fit through those holes. So I'm going to get it wet. Just this end is all I got to get wet, because that's what's got to form. And I'm going to let that sit and soak, because I want it good and wet. It's going to have to do a lot of funky stuff here to try to make that knot. Would you believe I forgot to turn the camera on? Good thing I'm making two of them, huh? So that's what it turned out to look like. Here is an original. Put them up next to each other. They're pretty darn similar. They're not exactly the same. Well, they're made exactly the same. Mine's a little bit bigger in this case, but I've seen them in differing sizes. You'll see them a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. Well, I haven't seen any smaller than this, but I've seen them a little bigger. I've seen some absolutely huge ones, and I think they're replacements, but there you go. Now, I'm going to show you how I did that. You need to get your strap extremely wet. I mean, almost dripping wet. And then just work it, because it's got to be really pliable to do this, or it's not going to happen. So just kind of make sure you can move it around good. You want to make sure those edges are beveled. It just helps a little bit more to get it through those holes, because that hole is a lot narrower than the strap is. So bend it kind of every which way. And like I said, the knots aren't really that hard. They are an extreme pain in the butt. So you'll take your two holes and just fold that over, just like that, till they meet. Not so hard, right? That part isn't. You'll take the end, and the reason you tapered that is because now you're going to go through. You're just holding it like that, and you're going to put that tapered end right through the hole. So there's really nothing to it. And just pull that down. Yep, it fits. Now, it took me probably almost 10 minutes to work that down like that. So, patience is a virtue. And that's all you can do is just, take the time. Work a little from the bottom. Don't try to rush it, because you got to remember these edges here are pretty thin by those holes. And when it's wet, leather can break pretty easily. When it's dry, strong. Wet, weak. Make sure you get your fingernails trimmed too, because you'll be marking this all up with fingernails. I did make these holes 4 millimeters. Just because I thought, after I got to thinking about it and looking at my pattern, whatever I did with it, I think I marked that on here. 4mm by 7mm slots. So this one I did make that a 4mm slot. So now you know how I get it. How we come up with some of those things. I was pretty detailed when I made that that pattern because I knew it was not going to be fun. So we're getting down there. I'm just trying to make sure, you know, everything's coming along nicely. Now I'm getting to where it's skived, so it's going a lot easier. And you get to that part where, with my pattern now, it's up here somewhere. Well, I know I threw it up. There it is. So, my pattern, or my strap went like this and it went through. So I'm at this point where I'm coming back around to meet this tab, and you just got to kind of work it in there as tight as you can. And I did make that tab about as short as I figured I could go without compromising the integrity of the whole deal here. So now, no, my handle fell off of my hammer. So I'm just kind of tapping this down a little here. And I'll fold it back. Tap it down a little here. Go a little bit this way. So just kind of, should probably zoom in a little bit, huh? Just kind of coming along, a little tap it here, flip it over, tap there a little there, a little there, fold it back that way, a little there. You just kind of hammer it down a little bit. And you look at it and you see that, you know, you're going to look to make sure you're down in there good. Sometimes you got to pull it through a little farther, a little better. And that's okay. We're never perfect the first time. Actually starting to look really good here. I'm pretty happy with what I've got. While it's wet, I'm going to go ahead and dye it. It actually looks good right now. I'm really happy with that. So I'm going to dip dye this. I'm just going to dip it into the bottle. I'm going to dip both of them. While it's wet, that dye is going to soak into the leather a little better. So if you do it while you're wet, you got a little bit better chance of the dye coming out better. So I'm going to dip dye it, and I'll find a place to set it to dry and move on. Then I'll work on this one. Till I get these dry, and I'll put some Connolly's on them or something to lock that dye in, and I'll bring you back when they're dry. Alrighty, here's the two knots that we made for the Luger holster. This one I believe is 1936. Can't say for sure. Maybe that's a... I think that's a 3. Maybe it's a 2. Can't remember. Can't tell for sure. I'll have to take a picture of it and blow it up. But once you dip them in the dye, they get kind of stiff after they've been wet and then dyed. And so we have to loosen that up. The best way I've found is just to oil them. And you got to oil them pretty good. Let them sit. Usually you'll have to oil them 2 or 3 times. And just kind of work them a little bit. That's all you can do. But they'll loosen up rather quickly, actually. I mean, it's already loosening up quite a bit. I expect I'll be able to install this by tomorrow without any issues. But they both turned out really well. Here's the other one. So I'll just have one laying around. And that never hurts, because then the next time I get a black holster in, I won't have to remake it. So we'll keep working on it a little bit here and let the oil soak in good. Probably let it sit overnight and we'll get her installed tomorrow. I'll just have to put a skive on this, skive that piece too on in the opposite direction, so that I can put the two together, stitch them up and ship her off. I may have to treat that strap just a little bit. I'll have to do something with it, I think. Not much, but I'll have to do something. Maybe I'll work on figuring that out. See what I can do to kind of get it all back together.